So I'll call the meeting to order at 7:01. I want to thank everybody for participating in this Zoom meeting. We've had another great turnout. That's good to see. Are there any new members or prospective members present? I don't see any, so
No, you have Dean.
who?
KN6 DMK.
DMK.
That's Dean.
Dean.
You need to say hi to Dean.
Dean,
Hi, Dean.
how you doing?
Good. Nice to see you.
Nice seeing you guys.
So he's a new member?
Trying to figure that out.
Okay. Well, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
I'm Dean, KN6 DMK. I live in El Dorado Hills. I've been doing radio for the last 3 years and trying to figure it out. So I'm kind of joining the different clubs around my area. I joined the Auburn Club and the El Dorado Club, and I was thinking about this one.
Oh, good. Well, thank you for being present, and thank you for joining us. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to everybody knows themselves. Okay, I'll give the president's report. Well, everybody's here at this meeting. This is our normal monthly meeting. Hopefully by next month, we'll be able to meet in person, but it's still up in the air. We're down to 0, 1, and 2 new cases in this county per day. So things are improving. So hopefully in another 4 weeks, we'll be able to meet in person, but we'll see. And if not, we'll meet on Zoom again. Upcoming events are just the field day committee is very hard at work. Right now we're trying to secure the site, so that it looks like it's definitely going to happen. It's the last weekend in June. We'll be operating for 24 hours, and everybody has a good time. You can join us for any part of that or the whole thing. You can camp out or not. So it's just anybody can operate. You don't need a special license. Everybody has a good time. So there'll be free food, and I guess that's it. No bike rides this year, unfortunately, and the clubs. We'll have a report from the treasurer, but financially we look good. We lost some revenue from the bike club, but I think we'll be okay. So I think that's it. John, do you want to give your treasurer's report, please?
Why, certainly. I'd be happy to do that. So the treasurer's report for the month of March, we had income of $115, which was memberships. We had expenses of $90.84, which was the bill from Volcano Communications. So this month we actually made a few bucks. We started with $1,716.73. We ended up with $1,740.89 unreconciled, since the bank statement has not come in yet. But that's roughly where we are. Very, very close to perfectly roughly.
Well, that's good. Thanks, John. Does anybody have any questions for John?
Kirkpatrick, W6FS.
Go ahead, Don.
John, just to let you know, we are now coordinated. I bought the license.
with the Northern California outfit?
That is correct. Affirmative.
How much do I owe you for reimbursement on that fee, which should be an annual cost?
I'm just going to give it to the club. It's too much trouble.
Well, that's very generous of you and selfish on my part because I don't have to write the check.
That is correct. But
Thank
just
you.
to let you know, because I know you were involved in the conversations, with the club, okay? And we had trouble doing it because they wouldn't take PayPal, and then they did, and then they didn't. But anyhow, we got it all straightened out.
Well, that's wonderful news, and thank you for bird dogging that because my efforts were unsuccessful, and I'm glad that yours bore fruit. Thank you very much.
No problem. My pleasure.
Thank you, Don. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Carrie, do you have a membership report?
Is that me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. Yes, we have 58 on our updated roster. I emailed it out yesterday to everyone. So please let me know if you did not receive it. My address has changed. Right now, it's just the number 4 and the word garrison. 4 garrison at protonmail.com. I have not checked my email since yesterday for any changes or updates, but please contact me if you need to make some. And I still need email addresses if anybody has them for Wayne Clark, Al and Joanne Edelmeyer, Sherry Edson, or Jim Snook.
Well, we should have Sherry Edson's.
How's that?
Aren't you in contact with her?
No, she's not my wife, and I don't know what the familial relationship is.
Oh, really? Oh,
I'd be curious.
the same last name. I just
Yeah.
assumed
Yeah.
she was related. Oh, well, my bad. My bad.
We should have,
I could have made some other comments, but well, drop it at that.
Well,
we should have Edelmeyer.
we should have some of the old rosters will have like Wayne Clark's, that's for sure.
And the Edelmeyers, yes, definitely.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
a bunch
we
of
could
them.
have those.
Yeah, somebody dig up the archives and get those from old rosters.
Rick and 6KLB, have a question for Karen.
Go ahead.
Yeah, is this, so I could take this roster and go ahead and update the net roster?
Yes,
was the question.
emails sent to me since last night haven't been integrated into it yet. But it's the most current.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and update the net roster. Well, I've got two weeks before I have to do it, but I'll take care of that. Thank you.
Good. Thank
Thanks,
you,
I'll
Rick.
send you any changes to you.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't call everybody on the roster, right? Who would be there all night. I think we just call the people who are who have checked in recently, right? Correct? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, that's correct. We don't call
That
everybody
is
on the
correct.
roster.
You are correct.
Yeah, so if somebody wants to get on the net roster, then ask and you can get added to it, I think. But
Right.
it's not like it's not automatically we call everybody in the club. We do have a visitor, club members that haven't checked in yet, can check in now. And so if you haven't been called, you check in then.
Yeah, I wasn't informed of that. I called everybody last time. All the
Oh, okay.
members.
Wow.
Well, that takes a while. I use my spreadsheet. So my spreadsheet has a subset of members on it. And so if somebody will call, if I see somebody check in a couple of times in a row when I do the net, then I'll add them to the list.
Well,
Can you send
I
that?
take it that Rick does not have a current list of check-ins then?
Right, he doesn't. Joe, can you send your the spreadsheet to Rick.
I think I already did.
Yeah, I have it from 4 weeks ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
Good, good. Okay,
I-
thank you. Go ahead.
KG6SJT. Rick, I sent out the net log from last night, and it has a roster of who was called.
Okay, I'll check.
And
I'm a day
if
behind
not-
on emails.
Like we
I'll
all
send
are.
you. I'll send you a few hundred.
I already get a dozen of them from you every day anyway, don't I?
Okay, thank you for the membership report, Carrie. It's good. We're slowly increasing in members. That's good, even though we've lost some. I still haven't called Dan Edwards yet to see if he's still active in the club and on the for the net control. So, but I'll do that. I think that's. Does anybody have any questions regarding the club's business or questions in general before we move on to the presentation?
Don, W6FS.
Go ahead, Don.
Yes, along with Greg and myself and Joe, now that I know, okay, I was pretty sure, you know, with Aries, we're trying to do WinLink Express for communications in Aries, and along with the Red Cross. They're very, Red Cross is very big on WinLink Express. So I have been doing a class online. Okay, well, not online. Actually, it's a Zoom presentation that's given by people, hams in LA area. Okay. And I know Greg is well aware of them also because he was part of the presentation one day, okay, of actually having a little speech. So anybody that's interested, and especially the Aries members that we have, I would like to invite them to participate in WinLink Express, okay, and get used to it. If you will, please, you can send me an email and give me your name. I'll give you the links and one thing or another, and you can kind of play around with it. WinLink Express is free, okay, costs nothing, basically, okay, even though you're registered. Some of the software, like Vara, is free for 10% of their speed capabilities. And then I think it's $60 for a full license, okay? But anyhow, I think we need to get involved with the WinLink Express and with Aries, okay, along with the Red Cross. So please email me at kirk1024@gmail.com. It's on our roster list, okay? It's exactly the same. So please do that. I would appreciate. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Don. That's and you're right. WinLink is very important to the Red Cross. Especially when we pass messages about people for medical needs or they're being transported to the hospital, we need to, or that they need certain medications in a shelter. The message system is extremely important because we don't want to send that message out over the air. On our regular net. When we pass messages, it's much more secure, and it's very important to the Red Cross. So yes, I would encourage everybody to, myself included, to learn WinLink Express. Does anybody have any questions for Don? It's going to be a very busy fire season, I have a feeling, and so we might get called out to support a shelter here in the Amador County. We might get called out to support other shelters in other counties. So it's very important that we be prepared. Does anybody have any questions for Don? Hearing, all right. Thank you, Don. You've done a great job. Myself and the club really appreciate all the work you've done.
I don't think we,
My pleasure.
Go ahead.
I don't think we have given Don enough recognition for keeping Aries going and bird dogging it and keeping it on everybody's at least back burner, if not front burner, and been a thankless job. So I think a good thank you is in order.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Thank you much. I appreciate
Go for it, Don.
it has not been a real problem so far, but you know.
Good. Of course, wait until we get in the middle of fire season, and it's going to be hectic. But anyway, I know you'll do a good job. Does anybody have any other questions? Hearing none, I guess we can move on to tonight's presentation by Joe.
All right, so I'm going to share the presentation. So I need somebody to tell me if they can see it once I do this. Right, okay, so let's go there.
Are you going to share a PowerPoint?
You should be seeing it now.
You can see it.
Yes, we see it.
It's good.
Okay, so now it should be full screen for everybody. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Someone asked me to talk about Starlink, which is the new satellite-based internet system. I actually have the Starlink terminal at my house. I decided to talk a little bit about Starlink, about satellites, how they work, why they work. I'm actually remote right now. I'm not using Starlink to talk to you, but I'm remote in Oregon, so hopefully this works because I'm just using my laptop in a friend's living room here. Okay, so today's TV and internet satellites, the satellites you mostly know, the whole seeing TV on the satellite, or even seeing, if you have HughesNet or something like that, getting internet from the satellite, those all work in more or less the same way. There is a satellite that is 35,000 kilometers from you. The diagram on the upper right shows basically how that works, except that the Earth is too big. That satellite is actually 5 times or 4.5 times the diameter of the Earth away from the Earth. So the satellite is really, really far away. That's an important thing that we'll learn about along the way. Because those satellites are so far away, they more or less stay stationary over a single point on the ground. That's called geosynchronous in satellite talk. And what that means is you can aim your satellite and bolt it down and forget about it. And as long as that satellite stays, as long as they don't change satellites, you'll always be able to get the signal in there. And there's a picture of a guy doing that, doing a field install for a HughesNet system there. The receiving dish is that big round thing he's got there, and then up on the right-hand side of that, you'll see a little rod there with a couple of pieces of electronics on it. One of those is the receiver, and one of them is the transmitter that enables the ground station to talk back to the satellite. Satellites don't actually use a lot of power because it turns out the signal gain is quite high. There's nothing that really interferes with the satellite other than occasionally the sun, which is a different problem. Satellites with 5 or 10 or 15 watts of power can be heard all over the Earth-facing disk that they face from geosynchronous altitude. So the big thing about this kind of system, which has been used since the early 1960s to broadcast television and to do communications between continents in the US, is everyone in the view of the satellite gets the same signal as everyone else. So there's an entire big section of the Earth that's hearing exactly the same bits from the satellites. The satellite is very far away from you, so the path up to the satellite and down takes 240 milliseconds at the speed of light. which is as fast as you can go. Also the satellites, because of the wanting to stay over the equator, or wanting to stay over the same spot all the time, they have to be over the equator, more or less. Which means if you're at the poles, the satellite dish points at the horizon, right? You'll actually have the dish pointing down and towards the horizon. When I was in Alaska, we had satellite communications, and the dishes were actually flat. They were like 87 degrees from vertical or something. Anyway, so this worked great for TV, radio. The XM and Sirius systems use direct satellite broadcast, and that sort of thing. But as an internet service, because of that, everybody gets the same bits aspect. What that means is the amount of bandwidth going backwards is actually fairly low for every user. So you have bandwidth caps, it's slow, it can get busy, and that ping time, the latency, is very long, hundreds of milliseconds. And that's actually one of the things that the Starlink system is designed to deal with. So a little bit about how satellites work. This is the orbital mechanics part of the lecture. A normal satellite, let's forget about the orbiting over the equator thing for the moment. A normal satellite like the International Space Station uses that diagram in the upper right-hand corner. The orbit of the satellite is inclined to the equator at some angle. At equatorial orbit, that angle is 0. For a polar orbit, that angle is 90 degrees. So the satellite will orbit directly over the pole, over the North and South Pole, and then go around the Earth that way. And that works too. There's a bunch of satellites that are actually in orbits like that. Weather satellites tend to be in orbits somewhat like that, so that they can cover the entire surface of the Earth and take pictures of storms everywhere. Spy satellites tend to be in orbits like that, so that they pass over everywhere in the world in that. But the inclination is very important to the orbit. The one thing that's really true about a satellite that people don't get is once you put a satellite in orbit, it's moving forward and it doesn't need to do anything in order to stay in orbit, more or less. So once the whole purpose of that rocket that goes really fast and has stages that it drops off and all that sort of stuff is to get the satellite going really, really fast in the orbit of the inclination the designer of the satellite wants. And once the rocket separates from the satellite basically needs very, very little thrust to stay in orbit. It will stay in orbit more or less forever at that point. There's drag, and there's a bunch of other factors that cause satellites to need to have station keeping thrusters. But those station keeping thrusters are like little puffs. They're very, very small thrusters compared to the rocket, which is huge, that puts it up there. And that's because you need to be going 18,000 miles an hour in order to be in orbit. But once you are going 18,000 miles an hour and you're in space, you will stay in that orbit for a long time. So one of the things about satellites is you put them into a particular plane, it's very expensive to change the plane a satellite is in. But it's very cheap to stay in the same plane and go a little further, a little closer to the Earth. That's actually a very inexpensive operation. So if a satellite has a non-zero inclination, so it's orbiting at some high latitude, like 40 degrees or something, it'll get a ground track like that map on the right or on the lower right, where you'll see the satellite. You've probably seen these maps at NASA and stuff like that, where you'll see this wavy form that goes up and down. That is what happens when the Earth rotates under the satellite, which is in one of these circular orbits, inclined to the equator. The satellite is going to stay in its orbit. The Earth is going to move, and so that sinusoidal pattern that you see there that looks like a carrier wave, right? Well, the reason it looks like a carrier wave is because that's the trigonometry of the inclined orbit around the rotating Earth. And you'll see that, like on that map in the lower right, you'll see that there's a sine wave that's all orange, and then there's one that's all yellow. And that's because the Earth rotated that much in between those two orbits. So it turns out the Earth turns, in 24 hours, it turns all the way around. That's about 15 degrees every hour And a satellite orbit is about 90 minutes for most of the satellites near the Earth. The International Space Station works that way, that sort of thing. Geosynchronous satellites are a very special case because they have inclination 0 and they're up at that really high altitude where the speed of the orbit matches the speed of the Earth's surface so that the satellite stays in the same place all the time. Anyway, that's a little bit of the science behind it. The first of the what they call the constellation satellites, where there was a whole bunch of satellites that perform a similar service, is the GPS system. This is a diagram of the GPS system when it was completed in 1993. Each one of those circles you see there around the Earth is a plane of, that's a plane of a satellite's orbit. There's actually multiple satellites in each orbit at different points. So one, they'll be spaced out like 120 degrees apart around the Earth. So if there's 4 of them in a plane or whatever, and there's a bunch of different planes, the idea of GPS, the reason this was designed this way is because the GPS is designed for the military. It's designed for the precision targeting of nuclear missiles. That is the only reason GPS was designed. The fact that you can use it to figure out where you are in the ground is a happy side effect of our need to destroy Russia. And so what happened was they needed to have coverage at the poles and very far from the Earth and that sort of thing. So they designed the system with 27 satellites that are arranged in, I think there's 9 planes, but I could be wrong about that. All the satellites are broadcasting on the same frequencies. Your GPS receiver listens for up to 4 satellites. Well, you can hear more than that, but it needs up to 4 to tell you exactly where you are on the ground. There's redundancy for satellite failure because this is a military system, and they assume that somebody might be shooting at the satellites, so they have extra ones so that if that happens, they can keep the system operational. The orbit here is about half as far as a geosynchronous satellites that do TV. It's still a one-way communication system. The satellites send information to the ground does not send information to the satellites. And it's designed to cover the entire Earth, so it covers the poles as well. Now, what we're going to do is take that same idea, get a lot closer to the Earth, and put a lot more satellites in. And that's what Starlink does. So on the lower left is a picture, or well, a rendition of a couple of Starlink satellites in orbit. The satellite is actually the little silver thing on the bottom, and that big thing sticking up is the solar cells that actually power the satellite. In there, Starlink uses over 1,400 satellites at a 550 kilometer range from the Earth. So, and there will actually eventually be 12,000 of them. Now I'm going to see if this works. I'm going to play a video. Somebody needs to tell me if you can see it. I don't know if you'll hear the audio.
Yes, we see it.
Are you hearing the audio too? There's a little music in the background.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So this, that is those little dots are each a Starlink satellite in the target constellation. So you can see like the Earth is like swarming with Starlink satellites, right? And that's actually what one of these internet systems looks like in the design view. I believe this is only the first shell of satellites. So there's only 1,500 of those little dots going around the Earth. And this is obviously simulated, but it gives you an idea of how many of those things there are and how close they are to the Earth. We'll find out in a moment why that is.
Joe.
Yeah.
I have a question. This is Paul. Have all of these satellites been deployed already?
No. It turns out they've only deployed I think about 1,300 of the original 1,500 satellites. Okay, so what do you get when you get Starlink? Here, let me actually make sure we're on the right page here. Yeah, that's right. So this is the actual picture of my actual Starlink. The little box you got sitting on my porch is how UPS delivered it. This is the part that goes on the ground that talks to the satellite. What you get in the box is kind of what you see on the floor there. That's the dish is facing down right there, but it's completely flat on the surface. You've seen satellite dishes that are kind of like curved and parabolic antennas and stuff like that. This is a phased array antenna. So that's a very sophisticated kind of antenna previously used only by the military. And what it is it's a flat plate that has a whole bunch of receiving and transmitting elements on the surface. And they're phase shifted to make the effect of a parabolic antenna pointing in various directions from the ground station. Because the satellites move like that across the Earth, like you saw in that simulation, the ground station needs to track the satellites as they're passing over your house. So the antenna is that big white thing. You also get a power supply, which is kind of the black thing on the pilot cable there. And you get a Wi-Fi router, which is that white thing that's plugged in with the white wire in there. There's also a regular Ethernet connection to that, so you can actually hook it up to a traditional router if you want to do that. I have that set up in my house. And then up in the upper right is where it's installed on the back roof of my house. I have a mount with a bunch of sandbags on it. I screwed the tripod down to a wooden plate and put a bunch of sandbags on it, and away you go. That's in there. So this, by the way, costs $581 for the terminal equipment, which you see there, and then it's about $99 for the service. It's $500 actually for the kit, but they charge you for shipping, and it's about $80 and tax in there. Anyway, there's a couple thousand of these. Yeah, 1 second. There's a couple thousand of these that are out right now. Is that Paul?
Yeah. Will snow interfere with that dish?
Interestingly enough, it has snowed about 8 inches while I had the dish. I was sitting there watching it snow and streaming HD YouTube at 60 frames a second on 4K, and it does not interfere with it. And the reason why is because the dish is heated.
Oh, wow.
One of the things that the power supply actually supplies the dish all its power through the Ethernet cable that goes to the dish. It's a pretty heavy cable that they give you. And there's 100 feet of it, and it supplies about 100 watts. So the dish surface is actually warm, and the snow melts right off of it. It's great. There are lots of pictures on Reddit of people who have these in places where it snows like feet, and they have the dish running because they started at the high latitudes first. So there's a lot of people in Canada who have this running, and that sort of thing. Okay, so what do you talk to? You know, when your ground station is talking to a satellite up there that's flying by, you know, the satellites are only over your position for about 8 minutes, and then it'll switch to a new satellite and talk to another one. So what do you talk to? You talk to a ground station. What happened? All of these satellites right now, it's a little complicated to explain the other way of doing this, but the way they do it right now is your ground station talks to a satellite, which then sends that signal down to a ground station. On the map on the right, those little green circles are all surrounding a ground station. And those are only the ones in the United States. There's ground stations in other countries too. And so those ground stations have like overlapping circles. That basically means that ground station can talk to a satellite that's anywhere inside of its little green circle. So if you look at the one that's up in Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, that's kind of a special purpose station because it's very far north. It's much further north than the rest of the constellation. And so that round green area is the area where a ground station, if it existed, could relay to that particular station via the satellite passing overhead. And the picture on the left is actually what a ground station looks like. That's one of the ones in Wisconsin. Those are steerable dishes underneath those little radomes, little white radomes that you have there. So they have several steerable dishes so that they can actually be talking to multiple satellites at the same time from a given ground location. The ground location will then take that signal that gets off the satellite and interface it to the regular internet. So that's where your bits go onto like fiber to go somewhere else. At that point, is they leave your satellite dish, they go to a satellite, they bounce down to one of these stations, and then they go into a fiber to talk to the internet. So what does a satellite look like? On the right is a picture, well, kind of an artist's conception of a Starlink satellite. They have 4 phased array antennas on the satellite, which talk to those ground stations. So the satellites know where the ground stations are too, and they are forming a beam with their phased array antennas to point at the individual's ground stations as they go overhead. The interesting thing is the frequencies they use. I actually put on the bottom because I figured you guys might care about that. And so the lowest frequency they use is 10.7 gigahertz, and it goes up from there, really high. The frequencies are assigned by the FCC to this particular system, and they're internationally coordinated. So Starlink will use more or less the same frequencies more or less everywhere in the world, although there is some difference as you go over other countries. There's other systems like Kuiper, which my son works on at Amazon, which will use different frequencies, and they have FCC licenses, and you can look up their license filings and find out a lot about the satellite system and how it works by reading the FCC license filing. So on the left, how do these satellites get in orbit? Well, on the left, I have a little video here that is actually the deployment. This is what happens when the rocket gets into orbit. It's actually gotten to orbital velocity at this point, and it's going to deploy its payload. They actually load 60 of these things onto a rocket at the same time, and so that's the little retainer that goes off. And you can see there's the satellites are leaving. They will all spread out over time. These satellites are being launched into a single plane, which is why we talked about planes of orbits. And right now they're at a low altitude. They're below 300 kilometers, but they'll eventually use little engines on them that'll actually raise them over time to the operational altitude, which is 550 kilometers. That's a launch that occurred in October. That's the 12th launch. They've now successfully launched 21 sets of satellites as of a couple days ago. They're launching a couple every week. No, I don't want to do that. I want to go to the next page. Thanks. So this is kind of a diagram of how that Earth station to ground, what the satellite looks like when it's going on. The satellite is flying by at really, really fast. It has a small beam that it's forming at one time that is moving around under its footprint in order to reach user terminals and ground stations in order to relay your signals from one thing. The Starlink system has 72 different planes with 22 satellites in each one. So the 60 satellites that actually get launched on a single Falcon 9 launch generally get deployed into 3 separate planes that are adjacent or near adjacent to each other, because plane change maneuvers are extremely expensive. So you want to use the giant rocket to make the plane change maneuver. You don't want to use the little engine on the satellite to do that. And the other thing that I mentioned before is all the satellite, they call it bent pipe communication because the satellite acts like a pipe. The signal comes up and it goes back down and it goes to a ground station. Eventually, these satellites will be able to talk to each other so that you can go up to a satellite, bounce to several other satellites, and then go down. And once you actually get to be able to do that, then there's all kinds of cool routing things you can do. And like one of the applications for that is providing coverage over the middle of the Pacific is really hard. And the reason why is because there's no ground to put ground stations on. So if you actually get more than, right now, the way Starlink works, if you get more than 400 or 500 kilometers from shore, you can't get service because there's no way to relay to a satellite, to do one hop to a satellite and go to a ground station. You can like around Hawaii and stuff, but in the middle of the Pacific, there's nothing, right? So what they're going to do to solve that problem, to fill in, the middle of the ocean, is bounce up to a satellite, bounce over to a couple satellites, and then go to a nearby shore and come down. And that's how that will work. But we're not there yet. There's a little bit about latency here. Basically, the latency you get is about an 8 to 15 millisecond round trip time to the satellite. That is, like the normal, like when I remember I said internet satellites before, like 240 milliseconds. Yeah, this is way better. I've never seen higher than 40 milliseconds on my Starlink terminal there. And that is very cool. If you're gaming, this is a huge deal. If you're using voice over IP, like telephony, this is a big deal. That sort of thing in there. And there are other systems like Starlink, which are coming. The launch on the left is a Russian Soyuz, and that is launching the OneWeb system, which already has a couple of hundred satellites up there right now. They're actually going to build an initial constellation of 720 satellites. Those satellites are in higher orbits than the Starlink satellites are. So 700. What that means is the green circles from the satellites are bigger, and so they don't need quite as many satellites. Yeah, the satellites are also much larger than the and more higher power than the Starlink satellites are. So that's a picture of one of the OneWeb satellites. Well, an artist's conception picture of one of Starlink satellites right there. And the other project is the one my son works on. He's a lawyer for Amazon, and he works on Project Kuiper, which is a very similar to Starlink kind of a system. They just announced their user terminal, which is actually much smaller than the Starlink terminal. The Starlink terminal is 36 inches across or something like that, 33 inches across, something like that. This terminal is only 12 inches across. So think about that from a standpoint of like putting one on a car or a camper or something like that. There might be things that Kuiper can do that Starlink can't in there. And so the conclusion here, internet via satellite, very fast, very low latency, very coming now. The combination of this and the pandemic is going to revolutionize the population of rural areas in the world. There will be many more people living and working from rural areas because they can get really fast internet from there, and they don't have to work in cities anymore. And after the pandemic, they don't want to work in cities anymore. So this is actually a very, very game-changing thing. There are literally hundreds of things that we have not thought of that are going to change because of stuff like this. And ubiquitous internet everywhere on the planet is a really, really different way of thinking about things. And like when mobile phones happened, like when Apple invented the iPhone, there were actually mobile phones before that, but Apple invented the smartphone, right? It was a good 10 or 15 years before things like Twitter happened, and Facebook ended up being mostly on phones and not hardly on desktop anymore, and stuff like that. And there's all kinds of examples of innovation cycles that were unleashed by the fact that you had a computer that you carried around in your hand with you all the time. Well, mobile internet, completely untethered to geography internet, which is what systems like Starlink, Kuiper, and OneWeb are all about, is going to be like that. And it'll be a huge change in lots of things. Anyway, that's what I had. So questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Is Project Kuiper online yet?
They have not launched any satellites yet. They have an FCC license, and they are required to launch 50% of their constellation by, I think, 5 years from June 5th or something, whenever that license was granted.
Thank you.
And I can't really talk about what my son does for them.
Yeah.
The fact that,
Go ahead.
the fact that these satellites are LEO, what's the life of an orbit on this? What's the life of the satellites going to stay up there?
Yeah. Okay. So I lied a little bit when I said once you get to orbital velocity and you're moving along at 18,000 miles an hour, you stay in orbit forever. It turns out you don't actually stay in orbit forever because the atmosphere doesn't really ever end. And so there's actually a little bit of atmosphere up there, right? Even the International Space Station, which is a big, heavy object, the heaviest thing ever launched by man, needs to have its orbit raised back up because it runs into things and decays a little bit. So a couple times a year, they fire the engines on one of the vehicles that's attached to the International Space Station to speed it up just a little bit and raise the orbit just a little bit in there. So the normal at 550 kilometers, which is above ISS. ISS is about 400 kilometers, but at 550 kilometers, you would expect an orbit to last several years without any thrust. However, they want to stay pretty close to that 550 kilometer operational altitude. They're required to by their FCC license. So they have little ion thrusters on the satellites that actually keep them up there. And they have already deorbited some, like they keep some fuel in order to deorbit the satellites so that they don't turn into space junk, because otherwise you'd have all these satellites raining down on other satellites, which would be bad.
Interesting.
Any other questions?
What's the effect on volcano television and internet, short range or long range?
Well, I think it's going to be a huge challenge to rural providers that this service is available. Once it's, you know, it's beta right now. There's, you know, I run out of satellites every now and then when I'm using it, and so I get little dropouts and stuff like that. I have a little map that I run that actually shows me where all the satellites are right now, so I can tell when I'm not getting internet if it's because there's no satellite. But once these things actually get fully operational, probably like at the end of the year or next year or early next year, I think it's going to be a big challenge. Anecdotally, there are people who have the beta on Reddit who are getting offers of reduced costs and stuff like that from their existing providers, because the providers realize, oh, wait a minute, there's a bunch of people who get the Starlink thing, and then they turn our service off. The big people who are going to get really screwed by this are HughesNet and DirecTV. I think those guys are going to, they're going to be out of business. Maybe the TV part will stay in business, but the internet part, I think nobody's going to use their service once this is operational.
HughesNet is lousy anyway.
Well, yes, but they don't think so, right? They're making a lot of money on they're making a lot of money on that service, right? The one thing that is true is you need to have a reasonably clear view of the sky in order to use these. So if you're in like dense trees and you have like the one path you can get to the HughesNet satellite, you might still have to be a HughesNet customer, because the satellites are all over the sky and they come in from different directions. So you need to have like a pretty good view of the sky in order to get this service.
The $99 a month thing, is that locked in stone, or is that introductory, or are they thinking of bringing that down?
That's the beta price for Starlink. They haven't actually said what the production price is going to be. My guess is it might be, they'll probably have, first of all, right now there's no caps, there's no bandwidth caps. You know, I've seen a couple hundred megabits a second sometimes, and sometimes I see 50 megabits a second, and it really, you know, it varies all over the map. And then, you know, this is the typical SpaceX thing, right? They're working with their customers to give them whatever they can give them. And they picked $99 because, you know, they figured a bunch of people would sign up at that. My guess is there'll be tiered pricing eventually, because Elon has already said that he wants to go to 300 megabits a second on the network. And he's talked about going to gigabit, which definitely requires the other shells of satellites to be up. With the original 1500 satellites, you might be able to do 300, but you can't do, you know, gigabit. So I think that will result in, you know, multiple tiers of pricing, and probably a lower one, and maybe $99 and maybe 150 if you want gigabit or whatever. Anyone else? I can't really see you all, so I'm kind of dependent on people. Here, let me stop screen sharing here so I can see you again. Yeah, good. Okay, now I can see you all.
Well, this will be a great system for streaming television and all sorts of things off the internet, won't it?
I already stream YouTube off the internet, and I have multiple times streamed 4K at 60 frames a second because I have a 4K television, and the television is hooked up all the time to Starlink, right? It's not hooked up to Volcano at all anymore. And so, yes, you do see some buffering every now and then, but I see that on Volcano too, right? And Joe, I can't do 60 frames a second of 4K within there. Now, there's a couple other people in the club who actually are Starlink beta customers. As a matter of fact, I see a Starlink dish there behind you. Is that a Starlink dish? Oh my, so you got the dishy. Oh, how nice.
Aaron. Hi, Aaron.
Hey guys.
It's not going to work inside though. You need to put that outside. It doesn't work inside. Is that what my problem's been? Yeah. You need to put that thing outside on the roof.
Oh, okay.
Your work's better out there.
All right. Okay. Now I know what my problem is.
All right, so I think there's a couple other people who have signed up to be in the beta program and have been accepted for beta invites. When did you get that, Aaron?
It's been sitting in the box in my room here for weeks. I got it probably 2 weeks after you got yours.
Wow. I can't believe you haven't put that thing up outside yet. Can't believe it.
Yeah. Well, my homeowner association of one who lives up, who's I also call my wife. I have to find a good spot for it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Enough said. But anyway, there you go. That's a user with dish in hand.
I have 3 towers at my house. You're welcome to put it up over here.
Yeah, you have to run the internet back to his house, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there an option for mounting this dish on a tower?
There's a pole kit, they call it. There's a couple things. There's what they call a volcano mount, amusingly enough, which goes on top of the roof. It goes on the peak of a roof. And there's also a pole kit. I have one of those on order. I have not managed to get my hands on it yet. So right now I'm using what they call a gravity mount with the original tripod sitting on my roof. But I have a 24-foot mast in my backyard that I'm going to get Aaron to come over and help me put the dish on top of as soon as I have something to actually secure it to the mount.
He said that those were back ordered until sometime later this month.
Yeah, well, actually, the good news is it's April, right? When I got the thing, it was like the beginning of March or something, and they said, oh yeah, it's like sometime in April, and that was like
I can't even find the link to order it anymore.
Yeah, well, I ordered it like an hour after I ordered my dish, and they said, oh yeah, sometime in April we'll send you a pole mount.
Well, this is April.
Yeah, well, sometime I might get a pole mount, and then if I get a pole mount, I'm going to put it on that 24-foot mast and see if I can reduce some obstructions a little bit less.
April Fools.
Yeah, exactly. So anyone else have questions?
No, that was a wonderful presentation. It really
Yes.
was very thank you.
You gonna make that available, Joe?
Well, allegedly it recorded.
It's still recording.
Allegedly it recorded. So when I get home, I'll be able to reprocess the video and upload it to YouTube, and I'll send a link out to the club. I did that for the whole meeting last month, actually. The February and March meetings recordings are actually up on my YouTube channel.
Joe, could you send that link out to the app where the satellites are and moving around?
Yeah, I'll put that in.
That'd be awesome.
All right.
Thank you, Joe. That was wonderful. We really appreciate that and all the work you put into making this presentation. That was extremely valuable. That was good to know.
Good
Does anybody have any other questions? Jim?
I just said good presentation.
Okay,
Interesting, knowledgeable, and that they helped a lot. My problem is I'm too damn old and live in too many trees to try and get one of those things up, but it might be fun to try.
There are people who top trees and mount them on top of the trees, by the way. There's a guy in Canada who's on the Reddit forum who actually has one 120 feet up in a tree. And the amusing thing is the cable you get with it is only 100 feet long. So he had to actually mount a box on the side of the tree at like 25 feet above the ground. So the cable comes down there, and then he runs power to that box so that he can extend it to his house.
What is the Reddit forum or Reddit? You used that a couple of times.
Reddit.com is it's a social network kind of system, and they have like separate forums for lots of things. And there's a r/Starlink. There's a Starlink forum on Reddit.
Okay, good.
So Reddit.
The time is 6 p.m.
No, it's not.
Can you fix that from where you are now?
Well, I think Don said he's going to try to fix it. If he can't, send me an email, Don, and I'll try to do it tomorrow morning or something.
I've been late.
I have a question.
Meetings.
I'll get in and reset it.
I have a question for those of you that know about HughesNet. How does the pricing of HughesNet compare to this? Because I have a client that's on HughesNet and has terrible service.
I don't actually have HughesNet. I was kind of hoping that Alan, N6WN, I sent him the link to this, but I was kind of hoping he would join this presentation because he installs HughesNet all the time. So he would probably know what their pricing is. But everybody I know who's on HughesNet, my son is on HughesNet and hates it. Right, his house in Seabeck, Washington, doesn't have any coverage, and he's actually applied for beta. It hasn't gotten into the beta program, so he's really pissed off that I have it. He doesn't.
Alan is giving a workshop tonight to a different radio club on the East Coast.
Oh, okay. That's why he didn't come.
So, Joe, can you get the guy? Oh, you can't get the guy to come down from Canada because the border's closed. So he can't come down here to install anything.
Oh, you mean like on the tree? No, he installed it on his own tree. Like I believe he topped his own 100-foot pine tree. Right. Which is more effort than I'm willing to put in. But I have a great tree that Starlink would work great on top of, but I'm not climbing that tree.
We have plenty of tree climbers in the area.
Oh, yeah. Oh, does anybody have any other questions for Joe? That was a wonderful presentation. Dennis, can you give us an update on field day or what the progress is going, or either you or Howard?
Well, I think the big thing that we're running into is trying to find a good site. And we did find one that looks interesting, and that would be, I think everybody knows where our repeater is located on Mount Zion. But anyway, right about 100 feet from the tower is a very nice, large area, probably a couple 100 feet long and at least 50 feet wide. It's clear that would be a nice site, but we need to check out, make sure there wouldn't be a lot of liability or a lot of expenses in being there. But I mean, it's close by, and it's great because you get up from that site, you have 360-degree view all directions. But I say we really need to check out and find out who's responsible and how much difficulty would it be for us to be up there. So I think, before we really move ahead, we really need to get the site figured out. And there's some other sites that if we have a drought year that would work out really well too. I've used some sites higher up country that in past years have been snowed in, but I don't think they'll be snowed in this year. So the big problem is we have to come up with some good ideas for sites, and maybe we can have some other people in the club help out with locating some good sites too.
Okay, well, does anybody have any questions for Dennis? Thank you, Dennis, for that, all that information. It's good to know. We've gone up to Peddler Hill before. That has pretty good view. That's up at 7,000 feet. And like I said, I don't think there's going to be any snow this year, but we could keep that in mind also.
Just a comment, Howard here. I'm working on the Mount Zion site. There's actually two sites. There's a public parking lot, which really isn't too bad. And we've done some rogue field days up there before without any permitting, and that worked very well. And of course, the other site Dennis described, which is somewhat superior. The problem I'm having with the, I call it the state site, is nobody seems to want to make a commitment regarding what requirements are involved, and I've gotten juggled around from person to person, and I'm having difficulty connecting with the right person. And it is not a state park. It is actually a state demonstration forest
Hmm.
is the category of that property.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so I'm getting involved with some of the people here in the area that deal with that site somewhat on a day-to-day basis, but they seem to lack the authority to make any decisions regarding either of the sites. So, you know, I've been having phone calls almost every day with someone, you know, from one of the local agencies involved. So
Howard,
I'm hoping within a week's time, another week, I'll have some knowledge about those sites. Personally, having operated from the public parking area, I think you were involved with that too, Don, weren't you?
that is affirmative. You know,
And I thought it was a fairly good site, actually.
yeah, and also Debbie Dunn, you know, she has some property up there off of Mount Zion Road. Remember?
She does.
Yes.
We could talk to her and look at that site too.
We were talking to her about if we lost our privileges at Mount Zion.
That's correct.
You might contact her and ask her. Now she sold, you know, the
Store
restaurant,
property. Yes.
you know, in Volcano. She sold that. So, but she's still around, I think.
I think she still has her property up there that she resides in. So we'll have to, I'll give her a call as well once we get to some resolution one way or the other. Well, if it's not affirmative with the state, then we'll have to start looking around for some other sites. But I think either of those sites will probably suffice for what we want to do. I do like that upper site because we will not be interfering with the public. That's one of the things I see as a good advantage. It's got a gate and we'll have to regulate opening and closing that gate, but we can do that. And that would be a superior site and give us a lot of privacy, but it would not allow the public to come up and visit us either. That's one of the negatives on that site. So anyway, I'm just trying to work through with CAL FIRE and Department of Forestry people, you know, to give us a list of what we need to do to use either of the sites. That's where I'm at right now.
And we can get Aaron to bring that Starlink system he's got up and give us internet up there because he's obviously not using it.
I'm getting very creative right now, looking online on mounting options.
Yeah, and it has good altitude, you know, so that would be great.
That's closer to the satellite, less latency.
All right, thank you both for that information. That was very, very good. As to the public not having access to our site, how many times has the public visited a field day site in the past 10 years?
Well, when we did it at Walmart, we had a small number of walk-ups.
Right.
Because we were in the Walmart parking lot, so people come over and say, "What are you guys doing over here?"
Exactly, right. But any other site, the public is, even at Daffodil Hill, we had, I don't think we had anybody come up from just walking in, passersby. But anyway,
No, I don't think they knew about it, but we also had the Boy Scouts come and they got their badges.
Well, I remember that, yeah.
So
we did have a pretty good contingency of Boy Scouts.
That's because we invited them. That's
yeah.
Well,
so that's how they knew about it.
I understood that they expressed an interest again
Yeah, well, we could actually get it announced on like the radio station and stuff like that if we wanted to.
Well, I'm the PIO for the club, so I want to do something, but I can't do it until we tie things down better.
Oh, definitely, yes, yeah.
Okay.
And I could talk to the Boy Scouts again. I was the one that invited them up to Daffodil Hill. So if you want me to, I can invite them again.
So I'm in
I think
someone
that'd be a
else's
good
house
idea.
here, so I need to like get going fairly soon. So do we have other business?
Oh, okay. Does anybody have any other questions about anything?
Rick does.
Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, just a real quick, if anybody is interested in providing communications for event, I know all the bike events have been canceled, but the Tevis endurance ride has not been canceled. They are going full speed ahead. It's a great opportunity to practice how to use WinLink out in the field. So if you're interested, please address an email to me, to Rick, at radio@tevis.org.
Oh,
And when is the Tevis event?
Oh, you were going to ask. I believe it's the last, I forgot the date. It's the last weekend in July.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any other questions about anything? Hearing none, the meeting is now closed at 8:08. And thank you, Joe, for hosting this. You did an excellent job as usual. And I want to thank everybody who signed into Zoom. This was great. We had 19 people here again tonight, so it's good to see. And hopefully, as of right now, we plan on just meeting by Zoom in May. But we'll let everybody know if it goes to an in-person meeting. Okay, again, I want to thank everybody and have a good night.
Yeah, and before you
right.
go, I
Thank
made
you.
a mistake.
Thank you, and thank you, Joe.
Good night,
Thank you,
everyone.
Joe.
Tevis Cup at
Thanks, Joe. Safe travels.
radio@teviscup.org.
Thank you.
Rick, what
Hey,
was
good
that?
night.
Yeah, it was Tevis Cup at radio@teviscup.org.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
You might want to send out a note to K6ARC, the mailing list.
Yeah, I'm actually hitting a bunch of clubs and things and
Yeah.
and contacting all the previous people.
The El Dorado Club might be interested in that too, actually.
Yeah, thank you.
you only need 50, 60 operators.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I looked into that a little bit.
Oh, it's 100 miles.
Yeah,
it's
it's a
100
big
miles.
it's a
from
big course.
near Squaw Valley all the way to Auburn. So it's quite the
Yeah.
event, and it goes for 24 hours. And I'm working down the list right now of all the previous people who volunteered in the years past. We just got just like last week, they said, yeah, we are going to run this event. So we got to get people lined up. Thank you.
They've canceled the running event, right?
As of right now, no.
Oh, the running it's on? Really?
As of right now, they're still thinking about having the running event.
Do they need operators for that too, right?
They have all the operators for that event, I believe. Joe's pretty on top of things. He had that taken care of in January.
Okay. Oh, good.
Wow.
Okay. Any other questions? The meeting is now closed. Yeah, we closed it at 8:08.